excited, Nitsa. We have a special guest coming today.
Yes, we have the author of The Book Whisperer, the author of Reading in the Wild,
and Game Changer. And we wonder if she'll sign our books. Did you bring any pens?
Oh, I know for a fact that she carries multicolored pens. I've seen her do that when I have met her several times.
She's going to sign our books. We'll see you in a minute.
Welcome to another edition of Pages for All Ages. I'm Nitsa Campos from Pope Elementary.
And I'm Leah Godwin from Fitzgerald Elementary.
And we are beyond excited about our extra special guest today.
It is none other than the Donalyn Miller. She is the author of The Book Whisperer, Reading in the Wild, and Game Changer. Before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you've taught, what you're doing now?
So I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I actually graduated from high school in Hurst, Euless, Bedford ISD. So I went to LD Bell, went to college at UNT. I taught in Keller ISD and also in Northwest ISD in Tarrant County. And I taught 4th grade self-contained, 5th grade language arts and American history, 6th grade language arts and world cultures, and then just 6th grade language arts in those districts.
And did you work at Title I schools?
I worked at schools that had all wide range of children in them, both in Keller and, yes, in Northwest ISD.
You did, okay. I think that's important because we have a lot of Title I schools here. And I just want to, in case someone says, you know, she hasn't worked with our kind of students. I know you have. Mm-hmm. So with students who are, you know, maybe free and reduced lunch or don't have books at home or don't have that book access, you've had experience with those kids. So you're going to learn straight from Donalyn Miller today. So in your book, The Book Whisperers, on page 2, you discuss why many children are not reading. They don't do well reading, and they don't see themselves as meaningful readers. What is happening, and how can we change this in our classrooms?
You know, I think it's really, there are four factors I would say lead to reading engagement success for kids, and they're sticky. It's the same 4 things at home and the same 4 things at school. They just manifest themselves differently at school. And that would be time. Are we setting aside time for children to read at school? Are we making sure they have time to visit the library on a regular basis? Are we spending time reading out loud to them? That's how I would see that time manifest. So at home, then that would be, are we making sure our children are reading at home every day? Are we making sure they have access at home, either through library cards or book ownership or some combination? And are we reading out loud or alongside our children at home? So the same components. So then next we would be looking at that access piece. Do they have meaningful, consistent access to books at school and home? We know that many children, disproportionately indigenous children, poor children, and children of color live in what are known as book deserts. And if you're familiar with the term food desert, you know what a book desert is. They're often in the same communities. Children do not have meaningful, consistent access to books at home. Children do not have meaningful, consistent access to books at school. Disproportionately helps some of our most affects some of our most marginalized children. And also thinking about what that access looks like in the summer. So if we have many children, I presume for many of us in education, our school library, or the classroom collections that teachers have, is the primary source of reading material for many of the children that we serve. So what happens to their book access when school closes for the summer? So time, access, choice. Giving kids meaningful choice and celebrating their choices, but also understanding that, you know, as adult readers, we probably feel pretty confident that if we walk into a bookstore or a library that we could find a book that we could read and that we would be interested in reading. Well, that comes from a lifetime of looking at books and trying some things and having different reading experiences, and also having those false starts where we pick a book and go, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. Right. Kids need lots of opportunities to preview, share, and talk about books in as low-risk circumstances as possible. And then that last piece, community. So time, access, choice, community. What is that reading community that children are invited to be a member of? Is it positive? Who's in their reading community? Is it just the librarian? Is it just the teacher? Those are important members of reading communities for children, but they also need children their own age to be people that they talk to about books. I know the three of us love to talk to kids about books.
Yes, we do.
We know putting a book into a kid's hands and they go off and have a positive reading experience and they come back to tell us about it, that's where the magic is. But ultimately, they're not with us forever. We want them to be able to have relationships with their peers around reading. And then at home, of course, how do they have relationships with family members around reading as a part of it?
Right.
We're going to be talking about book choice here shortly, letting students have free choice and the importance that has with graphic novels and what we can deem as good literature. But we will be discussing that later.
You know, in school, reading has become like a rote performance where the students like read a book and then they have to produce something or answer questions or
Some sort of activity.
complete an activity, and then they just fall. You know, it kind of falls into where they do that over and over and repeat and repeat. Can you share what a typical day in your classroom looked like?
Well, what we've done, and you've described it perfectly, Leah, is we've turned the purpose of reading into being completing activities. So I read this piece so I can get to this part. So it's about the performative aspects of reading, you know, the diorama that we can make out of a shoebox or the essay that we can write or the graphic organizer. And we know that reading isn't a performance at all. It's really transformative. So what's happening inside the reader that's transformative and powerful to them? I think we don't always trust that because we can't see it, but we know that's what actually turns you into a reader. So how can we negotiate then the academic goals that we have for kids around reading and the personal reading goals that we want them to have? I think we can still get the academic business of reading done. That's the job that we're in. We want to make sure our students are learning the knowledge and skills of proficient readers. But we also want them to find something that's personally meaningful about reading. And if all of the things that are coming at a child around reading come from outside of the child has no skin in the game. So in my classroom, you know, still had standards to cover, students still taking standardized tests. You know, I'm not teaching in my independent school out in the cornfield, you know, I still have to meet all those needs. But class started with independent reading.
Right.
Well, so when students walked into my classroom, they got out their books, they got out their reading folders, they sat down and read. I made that change early on to replace all my bell ringers, warm-ups, and sponges that I used to do as a transitional activity because I was looking at how can I find more time for kids to read and what am I doing right now that's not effective. And you can see that those, you know, daily oral language and geography trivia of the week was not really helping my kids grow as much as the reading did. So kids come in, they read 20 to 30 minutes, we know is the sweet spot. During that independent reading time, I'm conferring with kids, checking in with kids, helping them set goals, helping them find books, sending them to the library to talk with our librarian, maybe pulling some small groups for some strategy work. Then there's the whole class lesson, and that whole class lesson would be a mini lesson, so no more than 15 minutes of directed instruction with guided practice and then independent work. And then moving into things like read alouds. I usually closed up my classroom day with a read aloud every single day. Now, we read aloud for all sorts of reasons, and I certainly read aloud even with my middle schoolers, picture books, articles, web content, 2-page spread from a nonfiction book. We would use all those for lessons, of course. But I also like that pure read aloud at the end of the class where we're reading a novel for several weeks or we're reading a biography or some other great long work of nonfiction and we're just enjoying it and experiencing it and talking about it the way that readers do.
Just for the sheer joy and pleasure of reading.
Yes. I'm also trying to teach my students and model for them how to talk about books. You know, when you're sitting around with friends and you've all read a book together, we have different levels of discourse. We could talk about it in that critical way that we've been taught how to do and analyze it. But we also have those other registers of conversation around our reactions to the book, how we saw ourselves in it. For most of our students, the only writing or talking about reading they've been asked to do on a regular basis is to summarize what they've read to prove to somebody that they've read it. And that's great. We know they need to know how to summarize, but there's so many other ways to talk and write about books. So that pure read aloud is even an opportunity to practice that conversational aspect of being readers together.
And the excitement. I know when people are like, I need to talk about books, I'm like, let's have this conversation, let's have some fun. And even if it's like something I disagree with, I'm excited because it's a book that I read, and I'm excited to share my side, and I'm excited to hear their side of a book.
Well, we also know from research that as little as 10 minutes of talk a day around the books that they are reading increase students' reading comprehension and their motivation and interest in reading. They don't necessarily know how to have those conversations, so how are we modeling that for them and giving them low-risk opportunities to practice those kinds of conversations? It'll only serve them well later.
Man, I wish we had all day with you, Donalyn. First of all, I love her, but now, Donalyn, page 18 in the book Whisper, it spoke volumes to me. Would you mind if I read just the last paragraph? I'm just going to read this because it says, reading changes your life. Reading unlocks worlds unknown or forgotten, taking travelers around the world and through time. Reading helps you escape the confines of school and pursue your own education. It's through characters, the saints and sinners, real or imagined. Reading shows you how to be a better human being.
Exactly.
And that, I have that highlighted. I have an exclamation point next to it. I have notes underneath it. And reading shouldn't just be a school act. I know I read for pleasure to get away from my stress of the day, and I know you do that, and I know you do that. And we have lists that we'll never get through, but
I have stacks.
we forget that our number one priority is to get kids to love reading and become lifelong readers. Thank you for letting me share that.
Oh,
I
thank
would
you.
love to share the whole book with you. But
I'm glad that part spoke to you.
oh, it spoke volumes to me. And we had big discussions when I had a book study over your book for 2 summers in a row. I did the book Whisper with some teachers at Thornton Elementary, and then we did the Reading in the Wild, and they implemented what you had talked about and created readers in their classrooms. So I hear teachers say, I can't get my students to read. They don't like it. What do you say to that? And what did you do in your classroom to combat this?
So I had a student, I won't give you his name, but at the beginning of the school year in 6th grade, I had my students write letters to me. He wrote in his letter to me, I refuse to join your little cult of reading. That's what he put in the very first sentence because he thought I was over the top about reading. From a very practical standpoint, we don't let kids opt out of math in math class. We don't let kids opt out of science in science class. We don't even let kids opt out of PE, which the majority of them do not enjoy. And yet we seem to allow conversations where we even consider it's okay for kids to not like reading and not really do very much of it in language arts class. It's language arts class. We read and write in here. It's kind of what we do.
For the rest of your life.
It's kind of why we're here.
Yes.
So we will all read. I don't spend a lot of time talking to my students about how much I know they all hate reading and how I'm going to save them from it. I think it's dangerous for us as educators to paint ourselves as a savior on anything. But also, we read and reread and we write in here. It's why you're here. But the great news is, most of the time, you're going to get to choose what you want to read and what you want to write about. Right. So whether or not you read is not on the table. But would you like to read a science fiction book or a biography today? It's almost like we moved the choice away from the conversation about opting in or opting out of reading. Also, most children have not been given that level of choice in what they're reading, where they really do. They always start looking for the angle. When I tell them they're going to get to read whatever books they want, they don't trust it. They keep waiting. Yeah. What are the strings? You're exactly right, Leah. What are the strings? So it takes a while for the kids to get it. I think the other thing that really encourages kids to be more engaged with reading is for them to have lots of opportunities to look at books with their peers, book talking, visits to the library, classroom collections. The children, it's not me driving it all. I can't drive the reading lives of 130 sixth graders by myself. Right. But what I can do is create culture in the classroom where that's more likely to happen. Kids reading every single day, books of their own choice during independent reading time, book talking books that I think my students might like to read. Our librarian book talking books when kids come to visit. Making sure my students, even in the middle school, are going to the library for checkouts on a regular basis. And then you're relentless. You just don't get away from them. If our students walk into our classrooms proclaiming that they dislike reading, or they dislike any aspect of reading. I hate poetry, or I hate this. I presume it's because they lack positive experiences.
Yes.
They hate reading because most of their experiences around reading are negative. So I'm their teacher. What am I going to do about it? I can't just take that as the status quo. What am I going to do about it? And my goal every year is, can my students have a few more positive reading experiences than they have negative ones?
Well, I think it's a nationwide epidemic that's happening, starting around 3rd and 4th, where the love of reading is dying. And what's happening in those grades is standardized testing.
It's testing.
And what are we doing? We're giving star passages,
Right.
or whatever standardized test that state.
And they
Does.
are boring,
And they're boring.
and there's no point.
And it's not authentic text.
Well, there's no research to show that test prep actually improves students' reading performance on tests.
Yeah, there's only one thing that proves independent reading, authentic text.
I've talked to school districts about this before. And I'm talking district level administrators who are complaining about the district next door to them as test scores are so much higher. And they want to talk about demographics, which we know standardized testing are a better predictor of zip code than they are anything else.
Yes.
And what I tell them is, okay, that may all be true, but here's one thing I do know the kids in that district are doing that your kids are not doing as much, and they're not reading enough.
Not reading.
So let's dig into that piece. You know, what does their book access look like? If we really expect independent reading time to be taking place in the classroom, is it? Are kids going to the library on a regular basis? Because there's no research on test prep whatsoever after 20 years of standardized testing in the United States, which we know started right here in Texas.
Yes, it's independent reading.
Independent reading, truckloads of
reading.
research.
Yep.
And we just keep doing that test prep, though.
I
We
know.
just keep doing it. And
Well,
doing it
there's so much
because-
professional development on it.
Yes.
It's kind of drilled into our head, and we're scared about the test. You know, teachers are scared about the test too. But you know, just let them go. Just
Well,
let them read.
is it the cart or the horse, right? Because we know, or the chicken and the egg,
Yeah.
you know, we can pick whatever analogy we want to. The kids who score the best on our standardized tests every year, year after year after year, are the kids who read the most.
Yep.
So why are we not, and that also benefits them in so many other ways. So if we work on that piece, then we are going to improve their test performance, but we're going to get so much more, and so are the kids.
Can we talk about reading logs for just a second and give teachers permission to just get rid of them? You know, students have a lot of reasons they might not be able to read at home, and if you're going to have to log it, ugh.
Okay, so I'm presuming that in this context, when we say reading log, we mean a reading log that is sent home with the student for them to record pages and minutes on to show evidence that they read at home.
Yes.
Yes.
So within that definition of a reading log, let's talk about it.
Okay.
Because I get teachers that bring me their reading logs, and it's something they had the kids do in class, and it's different. So I want to make
No,
sure.
we're talking about the
It
one
is
we
talking
send
different
about
in
home.
class.
home
what they're
reading
reading
log,
at home.
logging pages and minutes.
And it's
Okay.
driving teachers
And the
crazy.
mom and dad has to sign it.
And mom or dad has to sign it. Okay, so I did reading logs when I was a new teacher because everyone in my department did, and so I did them too. But it did not take me the first semester of my teaching career to look at those logs. And if you're a self-reflective teacher, you can see some problems. I had some students who I was chasing the same kids every week for the reading log. They never had it turned in. They were often my students who lacked book access at home, did not own any books, did not have a library card. They may have been students whose parents work shift jobs at night, they're babysitting younger siblings, or they're staying with grandma or somebody else at night. So what was I judging them down for?
Right.
By giving them a 0 on that reading
Right.
log. Even my students who turned that reading log in dutifully every week, I started to notice some things. Same parent handwriting in the same slant and the same color ink Monday through Friday. So what was I really assessing? Parents' ability to find a pen in the car on Friday mornings. I had
Sign every day.
to sign
Yes.
every day. I even had parents who admitted to me in parent meetings that they signed that log on Mondays and filled it out so they wouldn't forget about it. That kids can log pages and minutes forever and never finish a book. That's
Right.
another issue. I had 2 students who I
Right.
talk about in workshops sometimes, Cole and Brian. Cole read 2 books in 5th grade and Brian read 1. But guess what he turned into his teacher every Friday for all of 5th grade? A reading log. And he read 1 book for the whole year
Right.
that he finished. So to me, I could see the log wasn't doing well. It wasn't providing me evidence
No.
of anything.
No.
I also when I announce to parents at parent night I'm not doing reading logs anymore, they break out in applause. because it's parent homework. By 6th grade, parents are so done with that reading log.
Right.
Now, when I tell students I'm not doing the reading logs, they start looking for the angle, right? How long before she knows we're not reading? And I just tell them in a casual way, oh, we're not doing reading logs. And they'll go, we're not. And I'll go, I don't need a log. I'll know whether you're reading or not. I don't need a log. And then they start to get nervous. How will you know?
Yeah.
And so I told one class one year, one little boy in one of my classes, he goes, are you going to call us at home, Mrs. Miller? I said, no, that'll interrupt your reading time. How do we know they're not reading? The bookmark does not move.
Yeah.
They make no progress. They're on a different book Tuesday than they were Monday, but they didn't finish the previous book.
Right.
Every time we go to the library to check back in a book, they've got the same book that they've not read at all. They're carrying it as a prop. You sit down to confer with them, they have nothing to talk about. I don't need that log. No teacher needs it.
Right.
Right.
And when I told a teacher, just get rid of it, it's driving you crazy, obviously. She's like, I can get rid of it? I'm like, yeah, get rid of it. And she did.
I want to empower everyone. You don't need the log. You know, building relationships with your kids around reading will tell you everything you need to know. You don't need that log.
No.
You don't need to be stressing yourself out about that log.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Donalyn. Thank you so much.
And what I love is when they do fall in love with a book or a character and they come and tell you, you know they're reading.
Yes.
You know.
They want to share.
I actually found some kids read more in my class when I took the log away. Because the reading log said read 30 minutes, so they would read 30 minutes.
That was it.
Right.
But when the log was gone, they just read until and I still expect them to read at home, and I do reinforce that to their parents. I just ditched the log. And many kids told me they read more when the log was gone.
Right.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Well, we say authentic reading. So let's talk about authentic reading. What does it mean and what does it not mean?
Well, independent reading does not mean reading your assigned novel independently. Independent reading, by definition, includes self-selection and choice. So if self-selection and choice are not included in that event, it is not independent reading. It's not authentic reading. As far as authentic reading, I think it's more about what are we asking kids to do with the reading before, during, and after the reading is also what pins it as something authentic. What type of texts are they reading? So reading your computer reading management program scripted text off a computer screen is not authentic reading. Reading a test passage is not authentic reading. Now, I'm not saying those types of reading aren't important and kids don't know how to do them, but authentic reading means authentic text, which means it's a trade publication, like a library book, or a book they can buy at the bookstore, or it's web content, or periodicals,
Journals.
Right.
something like that. So the text needs to be authentic, and then the tasks we're asking kids to do before, during, and after the reading need to be as authentic as possible too. Recognizing that we are still in a school, we still have to do formative and summative assessments around reading, but how do we ask kids to respond to what they read? I don't know a single adult that makes a diorama when they finish a book. I don't know a single adult that takes a computerized comprehension test every time they read a book. So how can we build in some opportunities where kids respond the way that readers really do? Book recommendations, book reviews, these kinds of things. What are we asking kids to do with the reading? If we're taking a novel and we're giving kids 15 things to do with it, it's not a novel anymore, it's a worksheet. So what are we asking kids to do? I don't have to have vocabulary words for chapter 2 just because I have vocabulary words for chapter 1. What makes sense for the reader?
I just want to make sure that star passages and questions are not authentic reading. They have their place.
They do have their place.
They have their place. But if that's all that you're doing with your kids, or if that's all they're doing at home, we've got a problem.
Well, I hear teachers complain about stamina all the time, and stamina is one of those words I wish I could put on a list of words I wished had never made it into education.
Exactly.
You need stamina and grit when you're under stress. Maybe we should be asking why our kids are so darn stressed that they need so much stamina and grit. But as far as stamina is concerned, we complain kids don't have stamina for a test, but they never read a whole book.
Right.
Every bit of reading we ask them to do at school is short. 2 paragraph here, 2 pages here, an article here, a test book chapter here. Well, if all the reading they ever do at school is short, then no, they don't have stamina. But we think the way to build stamina for the test is to make them practice the test over and over again.
Right.
Kids who have read a lot of books, that test is not that big of a deal from a stamina standpoint.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, you say time for reading in the classroom. So, like, when we give our independent reading, what were you doing? Because I think that's part of an issue that I have a lot of teachers that I try to discuss. Like, you need to be conferring, right? But they're always like, well, I haven't read that book. So when they are doing their independent reading, what were you doing, and how were your discussions going on with your kids?
Well, I think sometimes the teachers think that the purpose of a conference is a gotcha to catch kids reading or not reading. The purpose of a reading conference is to move the reader forward. I even have my students write in their notebooks, it's about the reader, it's not about the book. The book to me is just a vehicle to launch a conversation with the kid. And teachers are worried if they haven't read every book under the sun that a kid might lie to them. Give yourself some credit. Do you really think 100 kids are going to be able to successfully lie to you for an entire school year about whether or not they're reading? Give yourself more credit than that. How do you know they were at a birthday party on Saturday if you weren't there? They tell you all about it. That's how you know whether they're reading or not. If you sit down and talk to a kid about a book and he can't say anything more than 2 or 3 things about it, guess what? He might not have read it. But that's not going to be most kids. I bet you could think about the kids you had last year and you'd know exactly who it was that might have tried that. And if a teacher ever does catch a kid proclaiming that they've read a book that they really haven't, well, now you know what your goal is. That's the purpose of a reading conference, is setting goals and helping kids reach them. So if I have a child who has so much low self-esteem tied up in reading, or so much failure tied up in reading, or such a lack of motivation for reading that he needs to lie to me, then now I know what my goals are.
Right.
I need to figure out what's going on and why that accumulation of negative experiences has led him to where he feels so cornered, he has no other choice than to lie to me.
And we need to break that. We need to break that cycle that's happening year after year after year.
Well, if kids come to upper elementary, middle school classrooms and they are fake reading and avoiding reading, they didn't just pick that up yesterday.
No.
Many of them have been doing it for years at some level of success. It doesn't mean their teachers the previous year didn't know. It's just whatever they tried didn't stick.
Right.
We've got to break that cycle. And I find it's often a self-esteem issue. They haven't read very many books. They don't even know what kind of books they might enjoy. They don't, or they haven't ever had a positive relationship with a librarian, perhaps. You know, these are all, I feel like teachers don't use their librarians enough in these conversations.
Yeah, come talk to me about books.
Yes.
I would love it.
Definitely.
I don't have to know everything in the world about books and everything in the world about matching kids with them. I have a professional in the building who has an advanced degree in that topic.
Right.
So I can try what I can try, and then I'm going to be talking with my librarian.
Yeah, we're good resources.
Oh, yes. Incredible.
And during some of that reading time, were you also reading a book as far as modeling or?
At the beginning of the school year, I'm probably not conferring with kids much because I'm waiting for my class list to be accurate. You know, you're still got new kids coming in and everything else.
Yes.
But I'm trying to get that ritual and routine around independent reading going. We're setting aside this time every day. It will be sacred time. And that takes a few weeks for kids to really get into the routine of it. Oh, we're doing this every day. Oh, we're still doing it. And so sometimes at the beginning of the year, if I see a class that's having trouble settling into that routine, I will go out into the desks and find my squeakiest table and sit with them and just read. And I'll usually pick a book that I know the kids would want to read so they can see my reactions to it. So I might sit and read with them at the beginning, but the rest of the time I'm conferring, and I can usually meet with 4 or 5 kids during that conference time.
Right.
You know, I can still do all those teacher things we need to do at the beginning of class, too. I can drink from my cold coffee on my desk. I can talk to a kid who is absent. Usually sending a lot of kids to the library right at the beginning because they need to swap out books. And
Right.
Now, I have read your books, so I know that you've worked at Title I schools, and I know you've had classes where you've had a lot of students who weren't readers and they weren't going to do your 40-book challenge. And with all this independent reading, even working at a Title I school, how were your, at the time, tax scores?
the year I had the highest need class was I had 100% pass.
Yes.
That is just the truth.
Yep, because of all the independent reading. And I knew that, but I need people to hear that.
Well, why would we think that reading is a gift that only belongs to wealthy children?
Yep.
And let's unpack what I mean by that. Most of our Title I schools are children who are in poverty. So we're saying reading is a gift that really only middle class and wealthy children can access. I mean, we're only perpetuating an achievement gap and a negative mindset about kids in poverty when we say they can't do it. I don't believe in low expectations for kids in a Title I school.
No.
And I don't think your school district probably believes in that either.
But we hear it.
And these are children that I was a child in poverty. My mom was a single mom. My brother Wendell grew up with cerebral palsy. He's in a wheelchair. He lives in a group home now. And my mom had 3 kids, one of them in a wheelchair. She took us to the library every Saturday because it was free. And my mother knew we needed to read. But I think it's unconscionable that a teacher would just decide for a kid that reading is not something he's going to be able to do. So let's just deny him the opportunity. I don't think we have, I don't know, that sounds borderline unethical to me. I'm not so naive that I believe every child is going to fall in love with reading to the degree that I do or that the degree you do. But what I demand is that every child be given a chance to find a love of reading. And too many of our kids aren't even given a chance.
Right.
For kids in poverty, reading is their way out. Reading is their key. That quote that you read, reading gives you the ability to have your education belong to you for the rest of your life. Why wouldn't we want every kid to be able to have that chance?
Yeah. Oh, I just love hearing you talk, Donalyn. I just love hearing it. And also just think about, I read up some stats I would put on my newsletter about, reading is the only link to a managerial position. And that is data driven. That is research based. And let's face it, the Math STAR test, what is it? It's also a reading test. And what are you going to be doing the rest of your life? Reading, down to a menu, down to how to put your bookshelf together. It's for the rest of your life. But what a great escape, and what a way to build empathy and learn about other cultures. And
to me, it's the one way we can absolutely guarantee our kids the best chance of a success in the future. We have no idea what future we're preparing kids for.
Right.
I mean, you think about now, there are people who have jobs as a social media coordinator for a Fortune 500 company. I bet when all 3 of us were in high school, that wasn't a job.
no.
No.
We don't even know what we're preparing our kids for. Here's what we do know. Literacy is going to be a part of it. So we're sending them into a world we can't even imagine what they're growing up into. But what we do know is literacy is not going to make it worse.
Nope.
No.
Strong
No,
literacy skills aren't going to hinder them.
It's here to stay.
Strong literacy skills aren't going to set them back in the future.
Right.
We are going to stop right there, and we will have a part 2 of our very special show with Donalyn Miller.